In February 2010, the Dutch government, ruled by the so-called Balkenende cabinet, collapsed over infighting over the Dutch role in Afghanistan. 5 months later, in June 2010, a new government was elected. The ruling coalition that came to power included the fiscally liberal People's Party for Freedom and Democracy, or VVD, at the helm, supported by the Labour Party, and the ultra-conservative Party for Freedom, or PVV, led by the controversial figure Geert Wilders. This dramatic political shift promises to have far-reaching impact on Dutch policies, among them the Dutch development aid policy.
The reason that the shift is right now is because the people have voted for other parties to come into power than previously. Two of the three parties now supporting the government have always been very critical of foreign aid the way we've done it. The PVV, who is not really in government but supporting the government, has always said it's total nonsense. So that won't explain the shift.
At the moment we have a government which is the most right coalition we have ever had. And it is supported by a party which is completely against development aid. But the other party is strongly linked to NGOs. So in the coalition there's a tension. There's no development activity which is not linked to politics. It's always about politics.
The new government policy will reduce the percentage of GDP to be given to aid, as well as a reduction in the number of countries in which the government will be involved as a donor. The policy plans to increase participation of the Dutch private sector as a partner in creating economic growth in the recipient countries. Some see this new policy as representative of the priorities of the newly elected conservative coalition. But one must ask, is it all about politics?
What is the positive effect of aid when in those societies the structure is still such that aid will not reach those who need, but will be in the pockets of those who are already well off?
I think, in the past we thought development aid was very important, but it's not as important as it used to be. But to reach the poorest people, and then preferably women, and then preferably in deserted areas, Now, I must tell you, that's the most difficult thing to achieve.
A report issued by the Dutch government in 2010 stated that the era in which the value of development aid was considered self-evident has come to an end. If this is true, where does the government go from here?
Well, so the government wants to be more rational, and they say, let's not suggest that we can help everybody and that we can that we do it only for these countries. Let's be realistic and say, one, we choose certain countries, and we have reasons to choose these countries because they are poor countries, because we have long-lasting relations, because we have economic relations. I don't care, but we have to make a choice.
Reducing the numbers to make sure you can do things better, more solid, is probably the end better.
Reducing the number of recipient countries for the sake of efficiency, I think is not a sufficient argument in itself.
One of the criteria I know is that countries which are labeled as transition countries, for instance Indonesia and also Vietnam, countries making real progress in their development, could be taken off the list.
Main criteria will be one, good governance. So the fact that the judgment made is that whatever you deliver in terms of aid will really, let's say, have an impact, will have a sustainable impact, and that is the criteria of good governance is thereby quite essential. And the second is are those countries interested in those fields that the Dutch ones spearhead?
I am not at all concerned about the decrease of 0.8% of the gross, national income to 0.7%. Frankly speaking, I couldn't care less. The reason is simple. In the past 40 years, the correlation between money in terms of inputs in the supply-driven madhouse that development assistance has been, and the actual sustainable outputs has been very vague at best. The reasons why this reduction is there have everything to do, as you were saying, with the political constellation in the Netherlands rather than with what I'm saying. But still, I mean, it doesn't keep me, that part of it doesn't keep me out of my sleep.
Let's say to improve the effectiveness of development cooperation, both the private sector parties and the public parties, they should cooperate in an open way and should listen to each other.
I think it's government-to-government budget support that should be stopped, not necessarily support to education and health, because they are the right things to support. But again, not in a way that the countries always stay dependent on our country. It should be done in a way that countries themselves develop their own, let's say, business model and their own government finances and their own budgets and their own tax collection systems to make sure that people in society feel responsible for what's happening.
Let us concentrate our development aid efforts to the areas where we in Holland do have our skills.
So in the case of agriculture, in the case of water, we will look at countries that really are in need of that type of expertise.
The current Dutch government believes that working through the private sector is a more effective way of increasing economic growth and ensuring economic sustainability. However, the success of the private sector hinges upon the presence of a conducive business environment within the recipient countries.
One of the things, of course, of the investment climate that companies want before they start investing is the certainty that's offered by the local regime, by the local government, whether they can ensure property rights, whether there's a system like a system of businesses to verify that they're legit, a banking system, a financial system. You need that before private sector and private companies want to invest.
I like to see private sector investing in countries. I mean, booming economies in the Far East are good examples, I think, of where very rich companies have thought that it was wise to invest.
About privatization, you should not look at it as a phenomenon which suddenly exists with this new government, because it is already an issue for more than 2 decades. Then the populist party say, why should we support the people far away when our own elder people cannot get?
In 3 years' time, we will clearly want to see how these change policies will, what type of effect they will have here.
The issue in this success will be that the donor countries will organize themselves and will coordinate their efforts.
So my plea for better coordination, indeed, logically, there would also be more power and influence to Brussels.